The cabin door was halfway off its hinges when the first cop showed up. I was balancing a toolbox in one hand and a half-disassembled ceiling fan in the other when the patrol cruiser pulled up to the gravel shoulder outside my property. The red and blue lights flashed against the pine trees like it was some kind of emergency. I squinted into the sunlight and immediately knew who was behind this. Karen. Of course. Karen Thorne, president of the Pinewood Reserve, HOA, wasn't just your average HOA tyrant. She was a weaponized version. Overweight, overdressed, and overly obsessed with community aesthetics, she had made it her life's mission to monitor every nail, screw, and shade of paint within a 5-mile radius. And now, apparently, she'd decided that me moving into my own inherited cabin was a threat to public order. The officer stepped out cautiously, hand near his belt, like I was about to throw a washing machine at him. "Sir," he called out, "we received a report of unauthorized construction, suspicious individuals in tactical gear, and possibly illegal transport of weapons on this property." I nearly dropped the fan. "Come again." The officer looked at his tablet, then at my driveway, where a black SUV sat with 2 guys in camo pants loading crates. Karen Witherspoon, president of the HOA, filed the report. I blew out a breath, set the fan down, and waved him in. "You better come see for yourself before this goes any further." I wasn't worried. Not one bit. Because the men helping me move weren't suspicious. They were Navy SEALs. And not just any SEALs. Mark and Torres, brothers to me in every way but blood, and part of the team that saved my life 3 years ago outside Kandahar. When my uncle passed and left me this cabin, a quiet lakeside refuge hidden in the Colorado wilderness, I knew it would be the perfect place to rebuild. What I didn't know was that Karen had already labeled the cabin an unapproved dwelling because it didn't fit her aesthetic vision of the community. She hated that I didn't live here full-time. She hated that my truck didn't have mud flaps. She hated that the roof had solar panels. But most of all, she hated that I never bowed to her control. And now, when she saw my buddies helping me move back in tattoos, tactical vests, and one crate marked Field Medical, she did what Karens do best. She called the cops. Mark stepped out of the cabin just as the officer reached the porch. "Everything okay here?" he asked in that calm, professional tone only career special forces carry. The officer blinked. "And you are?" Mark reached into his vest and pulled out an ID. Not just any ID, federal. "Commander Mark Evans, U.S. Navy, retired. I'm assisting Mr. Carter with his residential move. We've cleared all items through proper channels. Would you like to see the transport manifest?" The officer looked at it, then at me, then at the crate labeled Tactical First Aid Navy issue. Yeah, he mumbled, suddenly unsure. "This is all legal." "Very," Mark said, folding the ID back. "We're not carrying weapons. Just gear. Medical, personal, and commemorative." "You were misinformed." The cop rubbed the back of his neck. I figured something didn't add up. She said it looked like a militia compound going up. From the tree line, a voice rang out like fingernails on steel. "That is what it looks like." Karen appeared in a fury of polyester and indignation, her face red and puffing, one hand on her hip and the other holding a bright green HOA folder. She marched right onto my property like she owned it. "You're not authorized to have this many vehicles on site," she shrieked. "And you certainly can't have military equipment out in plain view. This violates Section 14 of the HOA's Visual Regulation Code." Mark turned slowly and smiled without warmth. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're trespassing. This is private land." Karen waved the folder like it was a badge. "I am the board, and this is my jurisdiction." "Actually," Torres said, stepping up from behind the truck, "you're wrong on both counts." He handed her a printed document. "This land isn't governed by the HOA." Karen snatched it like a child yanking back a toy. "This is fake." "No," I said, stepping forward. "That's a copy of the 1992 exemption clause. My uncle filed it when the HOA formed. This property is grandfathered out. He never joined, never signed, never paid dues, and never agreed to HOA oversight, which means legally I have no authority here." Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She was rebooting like a broken robot. You can't be serious." "I am. And so is the county. This has already been confirmed." The officer turned to Karen and crossed his arms. "Ma'am, this is a private property dispute. There's no criminal activity here. Your report was false. Karen's voice cracked. I was trying to protect the community. You weaponized law enforcement, I said coldly. Against a veteran. Against people who serve this country. You used your title to create fear and you wasted public resources doing it. And for the first time, Karen looked unsure. Mark didn't raise his voice. Didn't threaten. He simply looked her in the eye and said, "If you ever step onto this property again without invitation, we will file trespass charges. And if you so much as file one more false report, I will personally escalate it to federal harassment." Karen flinched like he'd struck her. Her hand dropped from her folder. "You have 5 minutes to leave," Torres added, "or the sheriff's office will be called." Again, but this time not on us. Karen backed away slowly. The officer didn't follow her. He stayed on my porch, apologizing quietly before shaking our hands and walking back to his cruiser. Karen didn't look back. And just like that, the battlefield was quiet again. Karen stomped down my gravel drive like she was still in charge of something, but her limp told a different story. The kind of limp born not from injury but from defeat. The kind where your ego bruises so deep, it messes with your gait. I watched her huff back toward her golf cart, the one she wasn't supposed to park that close to my property anyway, and drive off, like a storm cloud looking for a new tree to strike. Mark exhaled with a chuckle, shaking his head. "Every damn time it's a clipboard and a code book," Torres added. "She's lucky you called us and not movers. They would have walked off the job the second she barked at them." But I wasn't laughing. Not yet. Because I knew Karen and she didn't give up. She regrouped. And she struck again 4 days later. This time, it wasn't the cops. It was a citation. An official-looking envelope showed up in my mailbox with a red-stamped seal from the HOA's Legal Enforcement Committee, a group I had never agreed to be governed by. Inside was a notice of non-compliance with visual standards, a fine of $6,200 for unauthorized structure, the moving truck, military presence intimidation, a direct quote, and aggressive verbal display on the date in question. And attached, a grainy printed photo of me, Mark, and Torres on my front steps. With Karen's handwritten notes on it in red pen, he was smirking, possibly mocking. Uniforms unnerving. It would have been funny if it weren't real. Camille's voice on the phone was ice cold when I told her. "She's trying to retroactively fabricate grounds for legal action," she said. "Which is fraud. We warned her once. Now we build the case." We didn't just respond. We went nuclear. Camille filed a cease and desist letter not just from me, but on behalf of Mark and Torres too. She cited Karen's misuse of the HOA's official letterhead, the false reporting to law enforcement, the attempt to collect monetary fines from a property not under HOA jurisdiction, and the targeting of former military personnel under false pretenses. And then she did one better. She filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office under the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, which specifically outlines penalties for HOAs that engage in harassment, retaliation, or attempt to impose fines on exempt properties. Karen didn't see it coming. When the official investigators showed up, Karen thought they were allies. She gave them a tour of the neighborhood, smug and talkative, pointing out infractions and overgrown hedges, until they asked, very calmly, why she had a folder labeled Disruption Watch List with my name and 3 others circled in red. That file. Camille subpoenaed it. Turns out I wasn't her only target. A retired schoolteacher who installed a non-approved bench swing, a widowed Vietnam veteran with a hand-built greenhouse, and a couple fostering 2 disabled teens who had a mural painted on their fence. Karen had cited, harassed, and threatened each of them under different aesthetic clauses. Only problem? All of them were also outside the HOA's governing map. Karen had spent years bullying people she had no legal claim over. And now, it was all coming to light. The fallout was swift. First, the state issued a formal injunction against her. She was removed from office permanently and fined $25,000 for fraudulent conduct. Her disruption watch list became evidence in multiple defamation suits, including mine. Several of her allies resigned overnight. And the HOA, desperate to clean house, issued a public apology through a community-wide letter acknowledging the abuse and pledging reform. But the best part? The Cabin Me Cabin was declared legally sovereign from the HOA in a public record ruling. That meant no future HOA president could ever touch it. No future bylaws. No community votes. Nothing. I was, at last, completely and permanently free. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I did something quieter. I had a wooden sign carved and mounted to the tree nearest the old gravel path where Karen used to spy with her binoculars. It said, "You called the cops. We called the truth." Then I did something better. I invited Mark and Torres back. Not for moving help this time, but for a proper cabin weekend. Fishing, bonfire, whiskey, stories. The neighborhood didn't flinch anymore when we walked around in vests and boots. A few of the neighbors who used to wave nervously now came up and asked for advice on garden fences or solar panels. Even the old man 2 lots down the one Karen said hated dogs came to toss a tennis ball for Torres's Belgian Malinois, saying he missed that kind of discipline in today's world. The place changed. Or maybe it had always been good, and one person just held it hostage too long. As for Karen, she left. Word is she's suing the HOA she used to run, claiming wrongful termination and defamation. But nobody's listening. When you spend years making yourself the judge, jury, and executioner, you don't get to cry foul when the gavel drops on you. And me? I sit on the porch in the evenings with the crickets chirping, a cigar in hand, the lake glowing in the dying sun, and the faint sound of kids laughing somewhere in the distance. This land is mine. Earned. Inherited. Defended. And now protected. So what do you think? Did Karen get what she deserved, or did I go too far defending my land with a few friends in camo? Let me know which side of the line you'd stand on.